Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend this next hour together. As always, I do sincerely hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family and each other because you matter. Which leads me to my opening observations. I have stated all along how much you matter to each other and to me. And as we go through this coronavirus that's spiraling out of control, we must be about the business of actually becoming more vigilant and diligent in taking care of each other. Look, without a doubt, this has been a very painful and challenging and difficult year for all of us with regard to coronavirus, exacerbated by the racial problems and the political divisions we have in this country. But this coronavirus surge within the new surge, is something that doctors, including the Surgeon General of the United States, Jerome Adams, is warning every American to brace themselves because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yes, the vaccine is on the horizon, it is coming, but everyone must do their part between now and then to make sure that we're tested, to make sure that we're wearing our masks, to make sure we're washing our hands, to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can, because this coronavirus will get to you some way, somehow, if we're not careful. Which leads me to my point about the National Medical Association, which represents Black doctors throughout this country. They're on the front lines of this coronavirus. And then there's the National Black Nurses Association, along with the National Urban League and Meharry College, Morehouse School of Medicine, Howard University, how they're all coming together and how they're presenting to Black Americans the need to stay actively engaged in safeguarding your lives. And they wrote a letter to Black America with love and with concern and with the promise and hope that they will continue to fight on the front lines to safeguard our communities, which are still experiencing disproportionate and adversely impactful situations with coronavirus. So to remind you just how serious this is, let me show you once again the love letter to Black America.
Dear Black America, we love you. We affirm that Black lives matter. And as Black health professionals, we have a higher calling to stand for racial justice and to fight for health equity. In the spirit of unconditional love for every single Black American, we have locked arms in an initiative to place the health and safety of our community at the heart of the national conversation about COVID-19. Respect for our Black bodies and our Black lives must be a core value for those who are working to find the vaccine for this virus that has already taken so many of our loved ones. Our colleagues across healthcare know that we are urging our community to take safe and effective vaccines once available. However, for this to be successful, they must do more to earn your trust now and in the future. We are on the front lines in care delivery and in key decision-making roles, from the lab to the clinic to the virtual boardroom. We urge you to hold us accountable. Please wear your masks, continue social distancing, hand washing, and avoiding indoor events until vaccines are widely available. With the holidays around the corner, we want nothing more than to break bread with our loved ones. But tradition cannot stand in the way of our health. We also ask you to join us in participating in clinical trials and taking a vaccine once it's proven safe and effective. We know that our collective role in helping to create a vaccine that works for Black people and that we trust has an impact on our very survival. Please visit blackcoalitionagainstcovid.org/loveletter.
And we'll be back with more after this. So there's a lot going on in the world today. As you know, there's the coronavirus pandemic, but there's also the president-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris making their transition. They will be dealing first and foremost with the coronavirus, but as the president-elect unveils his new cabinet members, it's causing some excitement, and it's also causing some people to look on the sidelines and question if he's doing enough to diversify. So that's what some of the critics are saying. I thought I'd bring in our political commentator, Avis Jones DeWeaver, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, to weigh in on the issue. Uh, Avis, it's always good to have you on the program. I hope you enjoyed a
Always my
good
pleasure.
Thanksgiving. And
Absolutely. I did. Hope you did too.
I did. It's been a kind of rough and tumble here at the White House. We're dealing with some things health wise, but we're getting through it, and praying always helps. But getting to the point at hand, we are very much focused on what the president elect is proposing. He's going to make some history today when he announces, of course, his all female economic team. Tell me about this, please.
Yeah, so he definitely has, already made some history in many ways. First and foremost, with the selection of vice president, the first woman and the first Black woman of South Asian descent in the vice presidential space, an all-female communications team. You have great representation among people of color in those specific spaces, as well as on their economic council thus far. And other spaces, we know we have a Black woman who will be the UN ambassador. So there is representation there, but I also want to come down on the side of the ledger that would say that I would really love to see more Black people in specific leadership positions in the various points throughout not only the cabinet itself, but also leading staff positions at the White House. I'm glad to see us there, but I would really love to see us in greater positions of leadership.
Well, a lot of people are saying that, and even from the Latino community, there was one op-ed that stated that a lot of Latin Americans, along with Black Americans who believe that they helped Joe Biden get elected, are hoping that they will receive more representation within the cabinet and the senior positions of the new Biden-Harris administration. But then that op-ed writer went on to say, keep dreaming. So
Yeah, well, I would say that it's more than a dream. And here's what I would say. And, just like Frederick Douglass taught us centuries ago, power concedes nothing without a demand. If I were just to compare, for example, where thus far Latinos are showing up in these appointments as compared to African Americans, actually, African Americans are being greatly outpaced in
mhm.
terms of the level of seniority and leadership positions that a community that, quite frankly, let's just get real, over a third of their votes went to his opponent,
Yep.
as compared to the Black community, which still came through heavily. My goodness. And compared to the Black community, which still came through quite heavily for this administration at around the 9 out of 10 range. And so we know, for example, with what's been announced, that there are already cabinet secretaries that are Latino. We know already that's what's been announced. The chief of staff for the first lady is a Latina. So we don't expect those to be sort of the only appointments. But as it stands right now, there are no cabinet secretaries that are Black. There are no Black chiefs of staffs thus far in terms of who have been announced. And so, it's very interesting to me that if you're just comparing these two groups, Latinos already are far outpacing the seniority level. And when I say seniority level, I'm specifically talking about positions of power and decision making are already greatly outpacing the Black community. And I'm hoping that the Black community won't make the same mistake that I believe many of us made in the Obama administration, where we would just, kind of grinned and bared it. I think that once again, we provided those investments in terms of our votes, and we're happy to see a Black woman who is vice president, but that's not enough. We need to have positions of power throughout that administration, and we have to be bold enough to demand it.
And why is that so important, Avis? Why is it important for Black Americans to be in senior positions?
Because we have to understand about when conversations are made or and decisions are made, the people who are in the room when those conversations are had are the ones who have input on what decision ultimately has, what decisions ultimately come down. And so when you have senior staff members in the room, it's very important that those people are diverse and those people come from various backgrounds that are going to bring nuances to those discussions that would likely be left out otherwise. So, I'm loving having, a senior advisor, for example, in the form of Representative Richmond. But at the end of the day, that's not a real cabinet position. That
Right.
is not a position of power. I think we really need to understand that this was a position that was quite literally made up under the Obama administration, and then because it wasn't a real power position, but it was made up then um, for to have some quote unquote pseudo black representation in his cabinet at that time. And now we've seen that same sort of tendency rebirthed under the Biden administration. When I think about the decisions that are going on right now, a lot of the senior staff that have already been named, for example, the chief of staff and other people in very senior positions, they're in Delaware right now, making a lot of decisions about who else are going to be brought onto the team. I don't, there's not any evidence, for example, that, you know, Ms. Representative Richmond is in on those conversations.
Mhm.
So that's just one example. So we need to be in the room when decisions are made. And to be in the room when decisions are made, it matters what position of power you are placed in. So there's a big difference between being the person in charge versus being the deputy or being a spokesperson or being an advisor. It's good to have, to have some representation, but we need to understand what power is and what power isn't. And we need to be able to demand positions of power.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about this important aspect of the Biden Harris team with Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver right after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political analyst and commentator, and we are talking about the all important cabinet members that will make up President elect Joe Biden and Vice President elect uh, Kamala Harris's cabinet. And one of the things that has really come to light is that there just at this point, Avis, there are not enough uh, blacks being nominated for cabinet roles. Now, it's still early. He still has time to decide on various people. But going back to the day that he won the election, he made it very clear. In fact, he stated, "Thank you, African Americans."
Mhm.
So is it just thank you and let's move on, or is it thank you and let's include you having senior seats at the table to
Yeah.
state, as you stated in the previous segment, to be there in the room when serious decisions are being made that affect all Americans?
And I think it's up to us to make sure it's that and not to be satisfied with mere representation. Representation is good, it's better than no representation, but it's really, we are owed positions of power filled by Black people that represent the interests of Black people. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation, but I think you get what I'm saying. Okay, so that said, I will say also that you know this thing is so, you've been around politics for a
Yeah.
long time. uh, a lot of these decisions are made by people who are not Joe Biden, for example. They provide a slate, they do a lot of the vetting. So there are a lot of people in the shadows that are making these decisions about who gets put in front of him even that aren't us. Okay, I'll just be very
Well,
real
look, we,
about
we
that.
saw this happen with the Obama administration.
Yep.
And a lot of Black Americans were scratching their heads, saying, what's up? We turned out in droves to elect you, and it's not a dig against President Obama, but at the same time, it is because
It's reality.
it's reality. He could have brought
Mhm.
more people into the fold to help. not only legislate, but to also help, uh, put together a campaign that would help all Americans. And to his point, he stated it very clearly that he did make significant changes for which we are grateful. And so here we are on the beginning of a new administration. And what you were saying earlier about senior level positions, it's good to see that. I mean, we see it in the Trump administration with Jerron Smith and Jonathan Holyfield and so many others that are there in those frontline senior positions. But you still want more than just a Secretary Ben Carson as a HUD secretary.
An election day is the starting line. It's not the finish race, the finish of the race. It's not the so really we did a great job by saving this nation once again from the existential threat that a second Trump term would have meant to this nation writ large, as well as specifically to thousands and hundreds of thousands of lives. So we did our job there. But we have to remember that was the starting gun. That was not the finish line. At this point, we need to be loud. We need to make our demands known. We need to not just sort of say, okay, we're happy that we're seeing these faces that's being placed on the screen. I'm actually reading the positions and I'm comparing them to other positions that people are getting whose constituencies did not support you. Let's remember that 55% of white women voted for Donald Trump. 3% more than who voted for him in the last presidential campaign. And once again, I don't want, we're playing the comparative card, but let's just be real. No demographic group supported this candidacy more than Black people. And it was Black people who pulled him over the finish line. I don't care how much people want to talk about suburbs as if Black people don't live in suburbs. And in fact, as if even more Black people don't live in suburbs now than in the past due to gentrification. The reality is it was us who pushed him over the finish line. And if you want you need to look no further than the fact that all of these sort of litigious, ridiculous, actions that Trump is trying to pull are all targeting highly Black cities: Atlanta, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit. So he knows it was Black people.
Right.
And so we have a card to play, and we just cannot be afraid to play it. We cannot be silent.
But that's
Power
why
can
you're on.
feed,
That's why
not
we're talking about
indoctrinate.
it.
Absolutely.
That's exactly why we're talking about it. Take another break. When we come back, we'll finish up with Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver and her political analysis of what's awaiting us in the future as it pertains to Black America. Back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, who is a political analyst and commentator, and also a successful author about exceptional Black women. And, look, Black women really brought victory to the incoming president of the United States, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Um, and I can understand your concerns about the path forward. And we know that Joe Biden wants to heal the soul of America and that he wants to bring humility to the office of the presidency. And that would be refreshing. But he has a Herculean task ahead of him. Not only does he have to satisfy and appease and reward Black women who led the charge in making sure that he got elected rather, but he must also reach out to those 71 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump. They will be hard pressed to assist him in anything.
Mhm.
So this is really a really difficult challenge for him and his administration in moving America forward and healing the soul of America.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be hard, and it's being made harder every day by the 70 what is he 4-year-old temper tantrum in chief, who continues to deny reality and sow lies, and in order to, I believe, created an even more difficult circumstance for Biden, specifically as revenge for having completely embarrassed him in this election, beating him now by, I think it's like a 6 million divide now, 80 million votes, right? that Biden was able to receive. So, that is going to be hard. But I will also say that I think we have to just be very real here. Um, that saying, I don't argue with people that Harriet would have shot.
Hmm.
That comes to mind. And here's the challenge. I don't think all 71 or 2 million people who voted for Trump are the crazy, crazy, crazy like QAnon type people. I
No,
would
no.
say maybe it's about, but it's a good chunk. I would say maybe it's about 20, 30 million that he will never be able to convince. And you have to be okay with that. And so what I want him to understand is that 80 million people voted for you. 80 million people voted for you with an idea not just to reject Trump, but with specific agenda items in mind. And it's your responsibility to deliver on that agenda, to be able to placate the people who actually voted for you, rather than trying to kowtow to a good maybe like 30 million or so people out of a population of 300 million. So let's not overinflate their impact in terms of their representation on the American population. Why are we playing to the lowest common denominator? These are people who peddle in conspiracy theories. They listen to propaganda arms who feed them lies all day. You will never be able to convince them. Cut them loose.
Right.
Don't try to argue with people Harriet would have shot. Focus on those people that put you in office and that can get you back if you act right, but who can be, at your doom if you don't.
Avis, give me the agenda from your perspective of what would really matter most to Black Americans as we look at the coming 4 years, this new administration that will take office on January 20th, regardless of what the current president of the United States is doing to undermine that. Um, what what is your agenda for Black America?
So for me, it's three things. Number one is going to be the COVID crisis, because Black Americans are disproportionately impacted. We are more likely to get it and we're more likely to die. So we need to address all of those things. Obviously, we could talk about the Justice and Policing Act that still languishes in the Senate. There's so many things that we can talk about, but the bottom line is none of these things will probably happen in a very bold and robust way, or at least at the level that they need to, unless we take back the Senate. And so that's what makes the runoff elections that will be happening in January so important to the future of this nation generally, but specifically for important to the future and the well-being of Black people under anything that that a Biden-Harris administration could do.
Sounds like Georgia on my mind. Great
Yeah.
song, but a great reality right now in terms of the balance of power in the Senate. And Dr. Avis Jones Weaver, always appreciate your insights and your analysis. And obviously, we'll be talking about this between now and the time that inauguration takes place. Appreciate you as always.
Same here. Thank you.
We're coming back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. So I can't really talk about politics without bringing in my colleagues on the West Coast Connection in the House, attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. So we're talking about President-elect Joe Biden and the cabinet members that he's rolling out. And certainly he's making history with each move, but a lot of it is going back to history with him employing Obama administration officials. What do you say about his current selections? Are you still finding some concerns that not enough African Americans have been named?
I am, as a former Clinton administration official, it was more than mere window dressing that former President Clinton appointed 4 African American cabinet secretaries during his administration. As a proud veteran of that same administration, I would like to see more. But I don't want to, I want to keep the main thing here, Kelly. I know that Congressman Jim Clyburn, who probably has more to do with this president being elected than any other person in the country, had expressed earlier disappointment about the fact that the top cabinet positions at this point had not gone in large measure to African Americans. This president-elect has an opportunity to appoint an African American Commerce Secretary, an African American Defense Department Secretary, an African American Attorney General. So the jury's still out on how this thing will completely unfold. Over the weekend, he's named quite a few more diverse picks. I don't read Black as the same as being synonymous with diverse. I'm going to be very clear. I want to see more Black appointments in light of the absolute unparalleled commitment that the Black community made to get this president elected.
Yeah, Timothy, that seems to be the foregone conclusion that a lot of African Americans, because they put so much sweat equity into this and voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that they wanted to see some representation of themselves in senior positions. What say you?
Well, I was disappointed that President-elect Biden did not take the opportunity to come out of the blocks with key African-American cabinet appointees. I am impressed with Dr. Rouse from Princeton being selected as the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. I do think that is a critical ceiling breaking. But again, we are the reason, our support is the reason that he's in office, from President Obama selecting him as his vice president to the most significant endorsement in the history of presidential politics, and that is the endorsement of James Clyburn, followed by a tsunami of support from African-American women and others that rode Joe Biden into the presidency. Under those circumstances, I think it is clearly reasonable and understandable that you come out of the blocks with a large concentration of African-American appointees in key, as Attorney Harris has said, in key cabinet posts, because the cabinet secretaries largely direct the resources.
What do you think about the president-elect naming Wale Adeyemi to the deputy Treasury Secretary role?
We have African Americans who've served on the Federal Reserve Board, both the Board of Governors and at various district Federal Reserve banks throughout the country. I would have liked to have seen one of those folks. They've earned the right to be considered either for Treasury Secretary or for Deputy Secretary. But I'm glad that he goes by the name Wale. I'm glad that he was selected for the Deputy Treasury Secretary position. It has never happened before. But honestly, when you look at this government, Kelly, everything is unprecedented when it comes to Black folks in key decision-making positions. We've had the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, position for many years. Back when it was when the Department of Education was broader to be health, education, and welfare, we had some runs in that space. But when you talk about the money, when you talk about the national security, when you talk about this nation's defense and foreign policy, African Americans have been absent for the most part. Interestingly, George Bush appointed an African American as Secretary as Secretary of State. He appointed an African American as head of the Joint Chiefs. I mean, let's not forget the history on this thing. I'd love to see President-elect Biden at least meet that standard and benchmark set by George Bush.
Yeah, let us not forget Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, who served this country very well in their roles. Timothy, you are a man looking at things from a perspective of representing the California African American Chamber of Commerce. When it comes to naming Janet Yellen to the post as Treasury Secretary, what do you think about that move?
Wait and see. There are some very critical policies that affect the African American community as a global community. There are opportunities within the Treasury Department, particularly when we're talking about African American investment banks being able to participate in the Treasury auction function, which is a large part of liquidity of this nation. So I'll take a wait and see attitude on Professor Dr. Yellen. My experience has been that sometimes the progressive left is, even though she would probably be between centrist and left, have a tendency to be strong on certain policy issues. But as Mark said, when it comes time to counting the money, see, diversity is a lot of fun until you have to divide the money. And then it can become a very, very ugly thing. So it'll be interesting to see how she extends herself to African-American professionals in the money market industry and long-term and midterm debt industries to ensure that our financing of coming out of this coronavirus recession and other challenges that we have, that we are active participants in.
Gentlemen, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what you think the agenda for Black America should be going forward into this new administration. We'll talk about that next. Welcome back to the program. I'm laughing. It's an inside joke between me and my good friends, the West Coast Connection attorneys, Mark Harris, as well as Timothy Allen Simon. Mark, you of course represent the Ben Crump law firm as a partner there, and Timothy, you represent the California African American Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot at stake for Black America. This has been a difficult year, painful year, coronavirus pandemic. We have not seen the end of it. Then we have the racial division that's going on, and we still have to heal as a nation. What's your agenda for Black America?
It's pretty straightforward for me. I've said before, I want to keep the 3 Ps in mind. When you talk about an administration, whether it be a gubernatorial or a presidential, it's about people who will head up these different agencies, the appointment process, the policies they will set, and the purse strings they will control. That's why it's so important for us to have key Black folks in positions within and without this government. As an economics professor at the University of California, and of course, as a former investment banker, I'm very proud of the fact that this president-elect has selected Janet Yellen. I think Janet Yellen, who serves proudly on the faculty of the greatest public university in the country, the University of California at Berkeley, is going to do tremendous things when she becomes Treasury Secretary. There were a number of changes she made as the first female chairperson of the Federal Reserve Board. It's a sad reality that for the first time in our country's history, it was just under President Obama that she became the chair of the Federal Reserve Board. All these years of this country, we're just now getting to the beginning steps of equity, but I think she'll be fine. And I think as Commissioner Simon just said, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we set a clear agenda, particularly in the areas in which there is so much money that is used to empower the investment banks, that African-American investment banks and those who are involved in the financial services industries should have a fair opportunity to have a seat at the table. And I think Secretary-designate Yellen will make sure that that happens.
Timothy? The
Well, I
agenda
hope
for
so.
Black America.
I hope so. I would first recommend Jim Reynolds of Loop Capital, Chris Williams of Williams Capital, Melody Hobson, John Rogers. There are a number of who are more on the investment management side, but there are a number of African Americans, independent firms that are engaged in global financing, global asset management. So it's no longer the excuse that we could not find qualified, which that term is always used when it comes to us. As a former appointment secretary myself under Governor Schwarzenegger, I know how critically important it is to go through a thorough interview and assessment of an appointee to ensure that they will make their resources available to the African-American business community, as well as the safety net policy issues that are so critical for us as a nation and as a people. Government, as Professor Harris knows, is the largest purchaser of goods and services. And even though California failed in defeating Proposition 15, which would have allowed affirmative action to resurface within our governmental acquisition and procurement process, we still have federal affirmative action. And I feel that every Biden appointee should be asked that poignant question: what will you do to make certain that your agency's spend finds itself in the African-American business community?
Very good point. And on that note, before we go, I need to ask you both, what should we be doing in the Black community? Because this is not a time where we're asking for a handout. We're asking for participation in lifting all of America up, and it has to start within our community. So what should we be doing to achieve that goal?
We have to keep in mind that we're demanding our fair share. We're not begging for what we've already bought. the Black community among all of the ethnic communities in this country, from Crispus Attucks during the Revolutionary War. Some say the person who was first killed, the first casualty in the American Revolutionary War, was an African descendant. So we've already bought, if you will, our claim to equity in this country. I think we ought to continue to demand equity. And I'm going to say something that some people are going to find controversial. Diverse does not mean, in this case, not anything other than Black. It doesn't mean a wide net. It doesn't mean an ecumenical approach. I am keeping my mind and my focus on Black, on African American. I really believe that we as a community get watered down far too much when we allow ourselves to be cast by the wide net of broad ethnicity or broad diversity. I think we ought to make sure that we keep the main thing, and advocate for what we've already rightfully bought with our blood, sweat, and tears in this country.
Timothy?
One, I think we need to win the 2 Senate seats, that being for Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff in Georgia. Mitigating the power that Senate Leader Mitch McConnell has, I think something that the founders who held our ancestors in enslavement, but the founders had no idea that the Senate chamber could wield such unwielding power. So that would be number one. 2, make certain that Democrats, who have again been traditionally known to more favor the safety net, important social issues, and yes, healthcare is critical, these other issues are critical, but also shift that focus to helping build wealth within the African American community and wealth succession, because I do believe that that will do more to remedy many of the ailments that we face as a community than some of the governmental efforts to engage in that area. And then third, we have to get ready for the midterms. We have to not allow the jubilation of the great election of President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, a dynamic team, by the way, but we have to get back to business, because stony the road. We have to continue this struggle to gain full global freedom, and that includes economic freedom.
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate your insights into this, because it's far from over. We got a lot of heavy lifting to do for every day. Every day we should be out there on the front lines, lifting our community up and making America greater and a more perfect union. Timothy Allen Simon, Mark Harris, thank you both very much. When we come back, we'll talk about a gift that you can provide for the holidays. It is Cyber Monday, after all. See how you can take advantage of this great gift. That's next. And welcome back to the program. So it is Cyber Monday, and you might be on the shopping list, or you might be out there trying to find out exactly what should be on your shopping list for this wonderful holiday season we know as Christmas. And certainly in the midst of the coronavirus, it's kind of hard to shop. So Cyber Monday is probably going to be one of the biggest holiday shopping days in the country. It's probably going to shatter records. So why not get something like a Black History book to remind people of how important this year has been to each and every one of us in terms of the racial divide, the political divide, and just the history of Black Americans. Joining me now is Jason Hayes. He's with Black History 365 Curriculum. And Jason, in addition to being with this wonderful organization, what else do you do to help people understand the role that Black Americans play in this country?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you for having us. Well, you know, with me, what I help out in doing is getting our students and young people to understanding why it is important to understand the history of African Americans, because that is a part of the American story. I've been an educator for 15 years. I used to teach history, communication, and also taught economics. And so with our students and understanding that, you know, our history is something that is very rich and is also needed. I used to tell my students that the movie Memento, it's a Christopher Nolan movie, is about a man who had severe amnesia. And so he woke up every day not knowing his own story, and that led to a psychosis. So it's the same thing. If we don't know our story of what has happened, we're actually going around and people are putting stories into our minds that may not be true, and we really are lost. So that's something not just for Black Americans, but Americans in general, and that helps out in understanding our full picture of our history.
Now, this history is very important because we're talking about 400 years, and a lot of people would think that our history started with slavery, and nothing could be further from the truth. And Black History 365 curriculum actually proves that. And I understand that you have it there in the Texas school system, particularly in Dallas and Arlington. How is that being received?
Yeah, so far, I mean, we've had a good amount of school districts, Dallas ISD, Crowley ISD, and other school districts, even in Peoria, in Illinois, that have adopted it. They love what's going on because what our mission is that it's not just a transactional, it's a missional.
Jason, thanks for being with us. It's a good Cyber Monday. So people, look, make sure you check out Black History 365. And Jason, the website again.
Yes, it's www.blackhistory365education.com.
Go there and get a really nice gift for your family for the Christmas season. Thank you, Jason Hayes. Appreciate you, man.
Mr. Wright, thank you very much, sir.
And we're coming back with my final word after this. And welcome back. I'd like to thank all of my guests who appeared on tonight's program, and I especially want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch. As I stated at the top of the program, you matter. Make sure you matter to each other. And hopefully, we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your friendly conductor. All aboard the Love Train.